We all love to travel, but our bank accounts do not. But what if I told you, you might not need to break your bank to travel? What if there is something cool in your own state, county, or maybe even neighborhood? Welcome back to the Obscurities of Atlas Obscura, a series where we look at Atlas Obscura, a website chronicling the weirdness of our world. They have a map of over 27,000 oddities documented, and they are everywhere. From the concrete jungles of New York City and Los Angeles to the actual jungles of Brazil, it's very possible there is something right in your backyard. This is my second video on Atlas Obscura, and if you want to watch the first installment, it'll be on the screen and in the description. I encourage you all to visit the website, see what's out there, and see what's right beside you. Today, we're going to cover 6 oddities of our world. Let's begin. Coming from a state entirely powered off coal reserves that ran out 50 years ago, I understand the need for renewable sources of energy, and I am a strong champion of wind, hydroponics, and of course, solar energies. The United States has a long history of investing in solar energy, and these discussions first began with President Jimmy Carter. America is facing an energy crisis, brought on by a rising cost of oil barrels. So explorations into solar energy as a viable power source took shape. This gave rise to the Department of Energy, which was created in 1977 and serves as the department that oversees energy policy and creation, with both renewable and non-renewable sources being investigated. The DOE then created the Solar Project, a wide-scale solar farm located inside the Mojave Desert in Southern California. So I'm kinda stupid. So my explanation of how it works might not be fully accurate, but here we go anyways. So these things, you see those right? They are concentrating the sun's energy into a focal point in the middle of that thing. This was done to produce heat, which in turn is directed to this black tower, which uses the heat to turn a steam generator, which then creates power. This project became known as Solar One, and consists of 7,820,000 square meters of solar reflectors that work together to produce 7 megawatts of electricity. So this is all well and good, but Solar One encountered some problems. The system could not store energy well, and like any solar panels, especially ones from 50 years ago, the least little bit of clouds would cut its efficiency. Solar One did receive a redesign and upgrade, appropriately named Solar 2, and more reflectors were added, now taking up 891,000 square meters, producing 10 megawatts of energy, enough to power about 7,000 homes. To solve the storage problem, a mixture of sodium nitrate and potassium nitrate was used instead of water, helping its inefficiency at nighttime or times of cloudiness. In 1999, Solar 2 was decommissioned, bringing 20 years of solar production to a close. The site then briefly served as a station to monitor gamma rays, but in 2009, 10 years after initial decommission, the focal tower was demolished. Today, Solar 2 sits in the barren desert, and is close to the public. But it is able to be easily viewed from Santa Fe Road and serves as a good view for anyone headed from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. Our next entry is a story that can be applied to just about any area of Earth: ghost towns. Towns that were incredibly reliant on a single industry, and when that industry dried up, so did the town. I'm very familiar with this, considering I live in West Virginia, which I guess you can call a ghost state. But ghost towns are dotted all throughout the world, and Capa, South Dakota is just one of them. Located just 1 hour from the state capital, Capa was founded in 1904. The town was founded as the railroad was stretched through the state. Houses, shops, a post office, and even their own newspaper, the Capa Hustler, was established. The shining jewel of Capa was their hotel, which offered mineral baths that had water so hot it served as heating for other buildings. Listen, it's 1904, you gotta take what you can get, man. As the Great Depression began, the small town of Capa was hit hard, or as hard as a tiny town of 300 people can be hit. And I think the one business in the area being taken away is considered a hard hit, as the railroad pulled out of Capa, which basically cut all business off. The town is on top of a hill, and that hasn't helped anything either. Over time, the population dwindled, and in 1976, the Capa post office shut down. And today, there is a single man living in the town. And I think a study on isolation needs to be done on him. Like I said, it's an hour from the capital and it's open to the public. But it's on a dirt road with no cell service, so if you're seeing it, be prepared. The horseshoe crab, one of the oldest living species with fossils that date back to the Devonian period, 400 million years ago. And these silly guys have not evolved in over 300 million years, and who can blame them? When you look like this, would you want to evolve either? No. Ever since I killed one of these things on Ark, I've been fascinated with them for some reason. Maybe I have a brain worm. And while yes, they are still alive, they live here, and I live not there. But I don't need to make a grand voyage to see these funky little guys. I just need to cross the state border into Ohio. In the town of Hillsboro, Ohio sits Crabbie, the world's largest horseshoe crab. Ohio is just the most recent of 4 resting spots for this thing, as it was first in Baltimore, Maryland, then being moved to a creationist museum in Kentucky, then to a church in Blanchester, Ohio, and finally, it now resides in Hillsboro, Ohio. This thing measures 67 feet in length, 28 feet in width, and stands 12 feet high, not counting the massive tail that looks like a lawsuit ready to happen. I think it would be hilarious if this thing didn't serve a purpose, like someone just built a massive solid monument to the horseshoe crab. But no, it's hollow, and it's just a roadside attraction, which is sad. I don't think this thing is being used to its fullest extent. Before, at the church, they hired a stunt driver to jump over this thing through a flaming circle. And then I guess the church realized how massive and how much space this thing was taking up, so they put it up for sale, which a family bought and then placed it in this field, where it's waiting to wake up. When you think of nations participating in World War II, who are some immediate names that come to mind? Germany, Japan, America, France, Britain, Italy, all major players. In fact, you'd have a harder time naming countries who did not participate in World War II. Dude, even Kiribati got involved. I love learning about these nations that involved themselves in the bloodiest conflict whose efforts went mostly unnoticed. For example, Honduras declared war on the Axis powers the same day America did, but their contribution began and ended as sending 100,000 bananas to Europe for the Allied powers. One nation who definitely got involved with the war, but remains kind of unsung, is Canada. Canada had 1.1 million soldiers participating in the war, and 14,000 Canadians were a part of the invasion in Normandy. While these efforts of war took place overseas, back home, the nation was ready to defend itself should the war come to the Great White North. We will be discussing one of these bastions left the time. We head to the island of Nova Scotia, along the shoreline. The area we're concerned with is called Duncan's Cove, and it was first settled in 1752. It turned into a small fishing community, dotted with homes and grand lighthouses for any sailor out at sea. When World War II rolled around, the nation of Canada prepared their defenses, and one such area bolstered was Duncan's Cove. The small section of island had several concrete structures constructed, including a 4-story tower that was to be filled with cannons, and a fortified coastal battery that was equipped with 3 6-inch naval guns. Of course, the war never came to Duncan's Cove, and soon into the 1950s, the lines of defenses were decommissioned. Now sitting along the coast, abandoned, left without a purpose. nature began the process of reclamation. Alongside nature, people have taken to vandalizing these concrete walls, using them as their own personal canvases. A lot of these old bunkers remain, staring out at the Atlantic Ocean. You're able to visit them today, but they're about 20 meters past the town on a muddy road. So if I have anyone in Nova Scotia watching, wanting to go visit Duncan's Cove, be careful. Horby, Sweden. The nation lives in constant paranoia thanks to the Cold War being waged between the United States and the Soviet Union. A man named Carl Goran Persons is reading the government-issued pamphlet If the War Comes, detailing the nation's plans should the Cold War heat up. And Carl is affected deeply by this pamphlet. It lit his paranoia fuse, and the fear of an invasion was all he could think about. And Carl wanted to secure his family's safety. So, he began to gather pieces of metal, concrete, rocks, and just whatever else of any form of sturdiness to reinforce his own home. This wasn't something he was doing for just himself. Like we said, he had room for his family, but made sure to include enough room for his entire village. Furthermore, he made a special, more protected room for the current king, Gustav Adolf VI. It's not known exactly when this thing was made. Gustav was king between 1950 to 73, so sometime in that span. Anyways, as we know, the Cold War remained cold and did not spiral into World War III, thankfully leaving the Soderto Fortress unused. However, if Karl's goal was to build a sturdy bastion, then he succeeded, as it still stands to this day. It's located along a country road outside the village of Horby and can be easily accessed by a car. We now travel south into North Macedonia, where we can discuss another abandoned town. But unlike our previous entry at Capa, this has not been abandoned for 100 years, it's been abandoned for 1500 years. Stobi. Once an incredibly well-positioned city that now remains as remains. Old roads, a dilapidated theater, and ancient stone walls is all that remains of this once massive trading hub of the Roman Empire. Or at least, that's who it belonged to before it fell. When the city was founded, sometime in the Archaic period, it belonged to the Paeonian Kingdom. Later, it would be conquered by the Macedonians before finally falling to the Roman Empire. Like we said, the town was founded sometime between 800 to 480 BC, and was able to house a blooming economy thanks to its position among two rivers, making it valuable to other powers at the time. Its first mention in text comes from the historian Livy, who writes about its conquer through Philip V of Macedon in 197 BC. And the city continued as usual. Once the Romans took over, it functioned as the capital of the Macedonian province for the Roman Empire. This was until a massive earthquake struck in 518, destroying massive parts of the city. Invasions of outside powers then finally reduced Stobi to what it is today. It's remained here quietly until the early 1900s when excavations began. Several important discoveries have been made, helping historians fill in the blanks of this once bustling city. And perhaps the coolest thing discovered here, in my opinion at least, is a well-preserved marble bust of Augustus, which was discovered in 2009. Another discovery were large frescoes painted of Jesus Christ, serving as some of the earliest evidence of Christianity in North Macedonia. Today, you're able to buy a ticket to visit the ancient ruins, and it's located here. It's about an hour from the nation's capital. We can begin the final entry with a question. What is the most bombed country in the world? The record was set during the Vietnam War, but it isn't Vietnam, it's Laos. Laos borders Vietnam, and part of the Ho Chi Minh Trail stretched through here. This is the path both the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese army used to move throughout the jungle. Supplies and soldiers were transported through this, and infrastructure such as hospitals, barracks, and supply stations were dotted throughout. It was the lifeblood of these two factions, so America began bombing the country to try and disrupt it. In total, 2.7 million tons of explosives were dropped on Europe during World War II. In Laos, there were 260 million bombs dropped on it. This was the equivalent of 85,893 bombs being dropped per day, or 3,578 being dropped every hour, or 60 bombs being dropped in 1 minute, or 1 bomb a second for 3,000 days. Today, about 75 million, or about 28% of those bombs remain unexploded, and unfortunately, since the Vietnam War ended, about 25,000 people have been killed by these unexploded bombs. Today in Laos, many people make their livings from these unexploded bombs, turning them in for scrap metal or repurposing them for other uses, which is where our entry comes from. During the Vietnam War, several planes had exterior fuel tanks that were attached to the wings or the main fuselage. Once empty, they would detach and fall to the ground. The durable, hollowed-out metal soon proved useful to the citizens of Laos, as they began to turn them into boats. They have been used for both commercial and personal matters, and the most famous spot in Laos with them is the village of Tha Bok. On the village road, a bridge crosses the Nam Kading River, and tours are given in these bomb boats.